Hey there, and welcome to Exponential Next Church Expression Series, a seven-part episode series that we have put together for you regarding church expressions and the different expressions that we're seeing across the United States, different ways that God is moving through expressions known as the church or the movement known as the church. I'm Carrie Williams. I am the executive director of Exponential Next, and I'm really glad that you're joining us. And today I am here with my co-host, Bill. Would you introduce yourself, Bill?
Sure. My name is Bill Couchenour. I'm the Director of Deployment for Exponential, which allows me to provide strategic and operational oversight for our learning communities and some of the other R&D and educational opportunities that we have. And I get to work with Carrie in Exponential Next, who's doing an amazing job. I really do think, Carrie, this is some of the most exciting work that Exponential is involved in. And if you got to see the world, see what Carrie and I get to see day in and day out, you would be very excited about where the church is headed. And so, yeah, grateful. And so, in this particular episode, we're going to be talking about what people would more consider as traditional church planting and why it's important. And so, specifically for this conversation today, we have Léonce Crump. Léonce is the founder and lead pastor of United Church in Atlanta. And welcome, Léonce. Good to have you here.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, maybe just go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit of your background, your family, and
Yeah. I'm Léonce, as they said, and I've been married for almost 20 years now. I have four beautiful children by my beautiful wife and one adopted son that we picked up along the way in this ministry journey. And we have lived in Atlanta for almost 17 years now, which is extraordinary to even say out loud. When we first moved here to plant our first church, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. When we first moved here, our oldest was 18 months old, and she starts at university in August. So time flies. It's extraordinary how quickly it moves. But that's a little bit about our background. Before going into vocational ministry, I had a short stint in the NFL. I knew God was calling me to ministry, but I wanted to chase that dream. And of course, God always gets his woman or his man, and it's on his timeline and not ours. And so my career came to an end, and I immediately moved into what I knew the Lord had called me to do.
So fun. Um, you're in Atlanta, and you recently changed the name of your church. Will you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that before we get into like the origin story of why you planted and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean it kind of ties into that, so maybe we'll be able to dovetail in pretty neatly. But it's a little more than a name change. When we moved to Atlanta, we moved to downtown Atlanta, and we had a very specific vision for a very urban church in the urban center. We moved to a economically depressed area. The zip codes around where our church was gathering at the time and where my family and I lived were two of the most violent in the nation, certainly two of the most violent in Atlanta. And so our ministry and the vision for our ministry was shaped by that context. And as a matter of fact, I don't know how traditional this would be considered, but we didn't start with a gathering. We started with small groups in our home, missional communities, and we hosted events and threw parties and did sports camps and did all of these very kind of parachute missionary activities that you would do in another country, and really treated Atlanta like we had never been here before. And that was the beginning of our first church. And so we launched publicly. We got here in 2008. We launched publicly in 2011, and things took a dramatic turn. All of a sudden, we had people coming from everywhere. In fact, in the early days, every single Sunday, and I mean without fail, I would put a slide up. I would have my team put a slide up of all of the churches, north, south, east, and west of us that people passed to get to us. And I would tell them, go to those churches. Stop coming here. And for whatever reason, that just made him want to be there more. Like, this guy's crazy. He's telling us not to come to church. You got to come and see this. And so in short order, I mean, literally in 5 or 6 months, we went from being a local parish church to a regional church. And that again changed the shape of our ministry. Our church grew very quickly to kind of that top 3% in attendance size of church, and then COVID hit, and we were and are in a city that if you were inside of the metro boundaries, it was made very clear by our city leaders that if you gathered more than a handful of people, that they were going to shut you down, and perhaps shut you down permanently. Okay. And so from March of 2020 to April of 2021, we didn't meet at all physically. And we didn't know if we would have a church when we came back. And this is a part of the crisis, the discipleship crisis that was discovered on the other side of COVID is people did not know how to be Christians without the habit of a weekly gathering. And we were right in the center of that reality. And so to give you a little context for scale, I would say pre-COVID, we were a church of 12 or 1,300 with an average attendance of 900 to 1,000. Okay. Our first service back in April of 21, we had 125 people. Wow. And so here we are at the time with 13 or 14 staff members and 125 people at this first service, and not really sure how we were going to move forward from there. We thought about closing the doors. We had just bought our largest facility we've ever owned in December of 2019. We bought 120,000 square feet on 12 and a half acres. Yeah. And 1 week before we were supposed to break ground, the world shut down. And so it was a real peculiar position to be in. And that's where the name change kind of comes in. There is, we spent 3 years, the better part of 3 years, just prayerfully rebuilding, reaching new people, reaching new communities. And I'll cut through some of the details. But the way we're organized is we are staff activated, but people led, right? We're an Ephesians 4 ministry. And so we don't have a whole lot of staff, even for the size we are right now. We activate our people. So we have 18 to 20 team leads who are volunteers who then lead the hundreds of other volunteers that serve. And I do something with them monthly called Leader Lunch, where I invest in their development. We pray for each other. We talk about any, hangups or hurdles they're having in leading their ministries. We eat lunch together and fellowship, and it's a beautiful time. And in one of those meetings, the brother who leads our assimilation environment, we call it Growth Track, he just pulled me to the side and he said, we've never not felt loved here. And everybody's incredibly kind. And we feel like we're a vital part of what Jesus is doing here. Speaking of he and his wife, he said, but sometimes I feel like we have two churches. We have the original renovation church, and then we have all of us. And the emphasis was on all of us. I would say 75% of our church is brand new on the other side of COVID. And so that sparked a conversation about our identity and about who we were and what we were trying to accomplish. And so over a period of about 15 months, I met with our staff, our team leads, our trustees, our overseers, in just a series of guided conversations to ask really the central question of what is our missional identity? What is it that we do uniquely and specifically? And what do we do better than 99% of other churches do and it can be preaching or worship. So that was kind of the start of the conversation. And what came out of that was literally 30 different versions of, we bring people together that would not be together in any other circumstance. That is what our church does. We bring together Republicans and Democrats. We bring together, 30 or so different ethnicities. We bring together billionaires, literal billionaires, and poor people. Like this is our church. And so out of that conversation came a new mission statement that we exist to unite people to Jesus and each other. And out of that conversation, one of the folks there raised their hand and said, that mission statement doesn't really match our current name or branding. And out of that came United Church.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Hey, I'd like to go back kind of a little bit for a little more context for this, and just kind of your origin story. You were a Christ follower before you went into the NFL, but how did that happen leading up to kind of where you were sensing God's call in your life to actually plant a church?
Yeah. And I think this is so critical. I knew I was called to ministry when I was 16 years old. And I had that affirmed and cultivated by multiple people. Now, I ran like the wind because, I didn't want to be responsible for anybody else's relationship with God when I was still trying to figure out my own. But I knew that calling was there. When I got to Oklahoma University, I went through a period of pretty intense rebellion where I just set Jesus to the side and I lived life on my own terms and did things my way. And of course, as you too well know, the Bible says sin is fun for a season, and then you hit a wall, and I hit a wall, and I hit it hard. And after a day and night of binge drinking, almost drinking myself to death, I woke up the next day in a neighbor's front yard. I hadn't even made it to my house. I just passed out in the front yard. And I came to this moment where I was literally saying to the Lord and kind of to myself, like, what is wrong? Like, why can't I get this together? And I remember that there was a college ministry gathering on that Thursday evening, and I mustered up the strength to go. How I found that gathering is pretty hilarious if we have time for a brief tangent. One night we were bar hopping, and this church was planted. So you want to talk about different expressions. This church was planted between two bars on Campus Corner. And so we left one bar, we heard live music coming out of this building, and we're like, oh, they got a band. And we walked in thinking we were walking into another bar, and we were walking into a church service. And I'm standing there, we're playing Edward 40 hands. So I've got two 40s taped to each of my hands. And I'm like, oh, that's Tomlin. And I turned around and like, it wasn't literally him. That's what they were playing. Yeah. And I turned around and went out, and then we went to the bar next door. So that's how I discovered that church plant. And it was there, Bill, that the desire to not only follow the calling into ministry, but to start a new church was actually put into my heart. That night I met a man named Mike Wilson, who was the pastor of that church planter, or of the church plant. He was the planter. And I was standing in the back of this room, kind of apart from everybody. And the Holy Spirit was just wearing me out. And he gets done preaching. I didn't sit down the whole time. I stood through worship. I stood through the message, just to stay as far back away from whatever was happening at the front as I could. And he gets done preaching, walks right off the stage and straight to me and grabs me by my shirt. I was wearing a t-shirt. He grabbed me on either side of the collar and he said, when are you going to stop running from God? Oh, now, I'd never met this man in my life to that point. And of course, I got defensive. I said, I'm not running from God. What are you talking about? And he pulled me tighter. And he said, when are you going to stop running? God has a call in your life. And I broke. And I began to weep. And he just held me. And he was not a big guy. And I was a huge guy. And so I'm just draped over his shoulders like bad clothing, and he's all right, big guy, I got you. And it was in that relationship that I realized why I couldn't get my life together. To that point, it was because I was a convert, but I wasn't a disciple. And I know we believe that discipleship is before the cross, through the cross, after the cross, but I wasn't being discipled. I believed the good news of the gospel, and then I was kind of set on my own. And so I didn't know how to follow Jesus. I hadn't learned how to follow Jesus. And he taught me how to follow Jesus. And he's also the one that put his hands on me and ordained me and called me into vocational ministry and put a hunger inside of me for planting churches.
I love that. It's a beautiful reminder of, you know, at Exponential right now, we've got a really big heart and passion for the younger generations, not just the younger generation right now, but all the ones coming up behind us. And it's just a beautiful reminder that so often in lives, the real work that happens that is expressed the rest of our lives happens in those early years.
That's right.
There's so many people that I've spoken with that are um, that if we named their names, people would know them, and
Mhm.
who have made an impact in the kingdom, in our country, around the world. And it all started back in those early days of somebody gripping somebody and saying, I see this in you, or why you running, or why you playing, those kind of
Yeah.
conversations. And it's just a reminder, like that's important work. I just feel like somebody needs to hear that as they're listening to this, that if that's you, if you're in college ministry or you're in
Yeah.
youth ministry or you're in that kind of that space, um, you're not striving to, lay down the striving to get to some other kind of level or ladder or position of leadership, because the kind of work that happens in those trenches, in those places and spaces, is the kind of work that impacts lives for eternity, that turn around and are multiplied, like Leon's. And so I think that's amazing. I didn't know that story, and it's very cool
Yeah.
you shared it with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So talk to us for a minute about when we say traditional church planting.
Mhm.
I'm certain that, half of our audience has an idea of what that might be. Another half is like, I have no idea what that is. And so share with us what, in your own words, what traditional church planting looks like for you. It doesn't have to be like the normative, but what is it for you?
Yeah. I mean, if I was going to lay out a basic blueprint, it's raising money, raising people, getting trained, and establishing a church. So you get a core team. I think 35 to 50 adults is ideal in a traditional church planting scenario for long-term viability. As you guys both know, I don't know the numbers and other expressions, but there's a high death rate in traditional church planting, and there are a couple of variables that lead to that death rate. Size of team is one. Having a sending church is another, actually being connected to another body. The success rate seems to go up pretty, no pun intended here, exponentially. If you have a sending body and they help you to raise up a team. So I think for me, if that's the blueprint you want to follow, and I have plenty of thoughts about how I think this should be done, but we'll start with basic blueprint. You have a call, so you get trained and you raise people and you raise money and you find a place and you plant a church, and then pray for God to blow the wind of the Spirit on it as you work on the systems of discipleship, of leadership development, and executing excellent Sunday services.
So if you were to advise somebody like, those are certainly the general steps in traditional church planning, but what are the two or three things that you think are sort of key or non-negotiable? Like if you're going to be a church planter in this approach, here are the two or three things that you can't sacrifice. These need to be part of it. What would you say those are?
Yeah, one is some type of formal residency where you can actually learn and be developed. It's much like a farm system for baseball or college football before you go to the pros. You may be wildly talented, and on top of that, anointed. And those are two different things. But that needs to be shaped and formed in some type of constructive way. I also think it is critical, and I wish I had spent more time doing this. I think it's critical for you to be in submission to another leader. I don't think you earn the right to lead when you haven't had to follow. And from the movement that I kind of planted with, that was not a value. It was all cowboys and mavericks, and we had big vision and big voices and entrepreneurial aptitude, and so we just went out and did our thing, and I think it hurt us in a lot of ways. And so looking back now, I hesitate to say this, but if I came to me right now when I planted, I wouldn't plant me. Period. Not at that stage. I needed more time, and God was just gracious to save me from myself in so many ways. But I needed more time to cook, and I can tell you, it's almost 10 years between when we planted Renovation and when we restarted with United. And it is a very different experience for me. And I think 38 is a far better age than 28 for this type of church planting. And then the last piece, I would say non-negotiable in a traditional style, is just resilience, the ability to get kicked in the mouth and keep going. A lot of people don't know this. You probably don't even know this, Carrie, but it was our fourth team that actually launched the church the first time. The first three dissolved for varying reasons, not the least of which us learning missionally that Atlanta is one of the most transient cities in America. So, we raised up this team of 35 adults, and 60 days later, we were down to 7 because everybody moved away for some bigger, better opportunity that they were looking for. And so I think having incredible resilience, and then I'll add one more to this as a non-negotiable, a plan for developing leaders. I think one of the big challenges that we faced early on was I went to seminary, and they said, preach the gospel, and if you build it, they will come. And
only that were true.
If only. And so I had no real plan or strategy for developing leaders. And I would even say, when I started at 28, I didn't even know the difference between discipleship and leadership development. And so I thought, if I get enough Jesus into these people, they'll figure out how to be great leaders. And it just doesn't work that way.
Wow. So on that note, let's kind of switch gears from like the head knowledge of what you've experienced and learned along the way, and let's talk to the heart for a minute.
Yeah.
If somebody's listening right now and they're thinking, man, I think I might want to plant a church, and probably predominantly younger, although statistics and the latest research tells us that the average church planter is in their mid-40s, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And so let's just pretend for a minute that that's not true, and it's actually a younger generation. And because I do believe God is doing something among the young people and raising them up. And so
yes, and amen.
Let's say they're sitting there and they're listening to your voice, and they've got that that feeling in that gut, and they know, and when even if you don't want to admit it. And so just talk to the heart of somebody who's considering church planting right now. Why should they do it? Are there telltale signs of why they shouldn't do it? What are there things in there that you learned along the way that are more matters of the heart that you would speak to?
Yeah, the first thing I would say to anybody is your influence can't outpace your sanctification. And that is a matter of the heart, of cultivating a heart after God. I think one of the most dangerous seasons I ever found myself in was probably year 3, maybe 4. We had gone from a core group of 35 to a church of 700 in 4 years. And I found myself only reading my Bible to prepare sermons. Hmm. And that was probably the most dangerous spot I've ever been in, because now my relationship with God was based on the performance of my preaching. It was no longer devotional. It wasn't intimate. And so I would say the first thing, Carrie, is just being a good Christian. Spending time with the Lord, growing as a disciple of Christ, growing in his likeness, practicing spiritual disciplines, putting those big rocks in place early. If you're listening right now, if you're not practicing a Sabbath right now, you're not going to practice one when you start a church. Okay. If you don't have a devotional life right now, you're not going to have a devotional life when you start a church. In fact, starting a church is going to do everything it can to compete with that devotional life. If you don't have a confessional community right now where you can practice James and confess your sins to someone else so that you can be, what's that word? They're healed, not forgiven. God forgives. Healing happens in community. If you don't have a confessional community right now before you plant, very unlikely you're going to have one once you start, because leading a church in itself is very isolating. You have to fight it tooth and nail. Planting a church, I believe, is twice as isolating. And then I guess on matters of the heart, the last thing I would say is understanding your sonship, your daughtership beyond your performance. If your identity gets wrapped into this thing, or your belief in what God believes about you gets wrapped into this thing, it's trouble, 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 trouble. And I've seen it over and over again over the last nearly 2 decades that I've been in vocational ministry, that this becomes how someone identifies their worth and their value, and it consumes them. And so I think navigating all of those things on the front end and actually building out a healthy discipleship pathway, which is why I think anybody at any age, but especially anybody under 35, should be submitted to an older leader for 3 to 5 years and be invested in at that intimate level to begin to deal with these things, to suss out the idols of the heart. I mean, it's probably obvious for me because I'm a high achiever, and so my greatest idol is success. Got to keep it buried, and that definition of success is so subjective. We hit a certain number of people in attendance, and I feel successful for a moment until I see Joby's shirt. Now I don't feel successful anymore, but yeah. But here we are in the top 3 to 5%, comparing ourselves to the top 0.5%, and that's idolatry. And so those are those little foxes that begin to burn down the bigger pieces of our lives if we don't contain them early, particularly before we get into the work and the labor of initiating a new church.
That's good.
Carrie, I feel like we should take these last few minutes and take that section and give it to every church planting organization in the country to play for every church planter. Yeah, Léonce, man, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today, for sharing not just your kind of your experience and what you've learned, but really sharing your heart in these last few minutes, man. That's yeah, I'm serious. I'd love every church planter in the country to hear that before they plant. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, my joy. It's just lessons learned the hard way, my friend.
Yeah. I do have one more question for you before we totally wrap up.
Yeah.
I hear it in the back of my head. that there are people potentially listening thinking, well, why do we need more church plants? We have so many churches in the United States of America. Why
Mhm.
should anyone consider planting another church anywhere? What would be your response to that?
Yeah, we don't have enough churches to reach the number of people who need to be reached. I mean, that is the base of it. I think. I mean, this is an old statistic, so I'm sure more research has come out, and I'm sure it's moved in the direction that we wouldn't desire it to move in. But I remember 10 years ago that missiologists discovered if you put together all of the people in the U.S. who didn't follow Jesus, it will be the third or fourth largest unchurched country in the world. And so when you have that many people who are not in a committed, life-giving relationship with Jesus, and those birth rates and the rise of the nuns are outpacing the number of churches that we're actually planting. That's the answer. I would also say we need replants. We need people to go in
Yeah.
and revive existing churches, and that's a different skill set, by the way, and it's a different calling, and it is for the patient and not for the faint of heart. But that is what I would say. And then statistically, we know that new churches reach more new people, and
Right.
and then that bell curve starts to go in the other direction at a certain point. And so if we're going to continue to reach new people, we've got to continue to plant new churches of every expression. But if you have a high entrepreneurial aptitude, if you got in trouble in school for always trying to do things differently than everybody else was doing them, if you got sent to the principal for talking during class because you finished your work early because you didn't go through the steps, you just found the answer, then traditional church planting is probably for you. And we just need to get you in the right system where somebody can nurture and develop and cultivate your head and your heart and your hands so that you can be as fruitful as possible.
I love that. And I love the emphasis that you've put in this conversation around development.
Yeah.
Um, and stats, I'll go back to the stats. I just heard this yesterday that for every four churches that close their doors, there's only one church being birthed or
There
planted.
you go.
And
Yeah.
so we are closing more churches than we're starting. And so we need young people and older people. I mean, they're second career people. I
Mhm.
think that's the new term.
Yeah.
Second career people looking at, should I plant a church?
Yeah.
And I would say, if you feel that tug, yeah, yes, you should. But be developed first. Make sure you put that time in, that formation that needs to happen, so that when you're burnt out, when you're tired, when you're questioning every decision you've ever made
Yeah.
about planting a
Yes.
church, you have that
Yes.
foundation laid underneath you that is unshakable and undeniable. And I love that you spoke so deeply into intimacy with Jesus, and that's where it all starts.
Yeah.
Lance,
Yeah.
thank you for being with us. Um, I consider you a friend, and so it's fun to have this conversation with you. And Bill, you want to add
Yeah.
anything?
No, I was just going to say, Carrie and I have so enjoyed these conversations. This one in particular, though, I'm serious. I think I would like, if I had my way, every potential church planter would hear that, especially some sections of this. And so, Leonce, really appreciate what you're doing for Jesus. And man, it's an honor for you to just to be with you today. I'm grateful. We consider you part of the exponential family. And so, yeah, grateful for that.
Yeah, and so refreshing to hear you hold your leadership in the way that you lead United, so open-handed in the sense that you could even pivot 10 years into it,
Yeah.
and ask the questions of what now, God, what's next?
Yeah.
And just appreciate your leadership so much, and the fact
Yeah.
that you serve out of a posture of humility. Um, Thank you for listening and joining us for this episode. And we hope that you'll tune in to the other 6 episodes in this series to get kind of a robust idea of how God is moving in the United States of America. United is one church. that you can look at and learn from. I'm sure you can just Google search them. We'll put the link to their church in the show notes so that you can just click it and check them out to, learn from them along the way. And Leonce, it's been so great to be with you. Bill, you're the best co-host and shepherd ever. And thanks for tuning in.